Okay, well, thank you for joining us this afternoon, guys. This is our Office 365 GDPR security webinar. It's going to be delivered by Colin Thorpe, our MD. So that's why I thought I'd better dress up for the occasion. Closest I've got to business dress in a while, as I was just saying. As always, if you want to kind of make any comments or ask any questions, don't feel shy about either putting your hand up on Teams or typing them in the right hand panel there. This webinar is part of a rolling program of webinars we're doing not every, but most Thursdays, from kind of Teams end user stuff through to the kind of more strategic side of Teams, the security, and also hub intranets as well. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Colin and let him take you through the deck of stuff and amaze you with what you can do with security. Well, I'll leave it to you, Cole.
Thanks, Paddy. Thanks for joining us today. Like Paddy says, I'm Colin, so I'm managing director here, but still involved in some degree with the consultancy team, helping to just sort of drive what we do there and make sure that we've got all the smart tools at our disposal that we can sort of help you guys to do what you need to do. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so you got the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. So aim of today is really to explain how you can keep your data safe using the tools that you've got readily available on Microsoft 365 or Office 365. So there's huge numbers of tools that you get with your Microsoft 365 subscription that will be available to you as an organization. And really, it can be several people's full-time job to keep these implemented and running smoothly. What I don't want to do is sort of spend time going into every single tool. What I'm interested in today is almost as a power user or somebody who's responsible for Office 365 on the ground within your organization or within your team, show you some of the things that you can be doing today to be making the data that that's important to you safer. So that's roughly what the aim of today is. As Paddy said, please use the controls that you've got available. Quite happy to take questions. I might even be able to answer some of the questions, but I've got Heidi on today to help with that as well. So yeah, raise your hand or put something in chat, or even just sort of unmute your microphone and say hello. That's all fine. Yeah, please don't do the hang up one. So like I say, what we're going to do, I've got a few slides. Before I start talking about data protection and security, I just wanted to recap on what those terms mean within an organization, just to give a little bit of context for some of the tools that I'm then going to show you later in the webinar. So I'm just going to run through a few slides, giving you a recap on what it is we're talking about. And then I'm going to run through 6 steps that you can do today within Microsoft 365 to start keeping your data safer than it was yesterday. And that will be live demonstration. Yeah, you'll actually get to see some of the tools during that section. So Microsoft 365, Microsoft spend huge amounts of money and huge resources in keeping your data secure. So 5 or 6 years ago, Microsoft made the commitment that everything that they did was going to be cloud first. And that's been the strategy of the business, and a very successful strategy for them since then. And they're trying to be part of this whole Google, Amazon world where they provide infrastructure to hold your data, and you basically, rather than having loads of servers within your organization that you've got to look after yourself and try to keep secure, they're going to take all that hassle away from you and do it for you. And so in order to do that, they have to put massive amounts of resources into making sure that that data is secure. And obviously that's a major focus of theirs. And you look at the volume of the data that they're actually handling, and you understand the importance. And for somebody like Microsoft or Google, if they have a data breach, that's going to be absolutely massively damaging to their business. It will be on the 10 o'clock news. So they take it very seriously. And this is really just to set the scene, because we're going to be talking a lot about moving more of your data into the Microsoft cloud. And you need to be reassured that this is safe. And to be honest, these were conversations we were having 2 or 3 years ago with clients. Clients these days understand this, and have sort of moved on to asking the hard questions about Microsoft security. But yeah, just to reassure you that they take that seriously. And then also within Microsoft 365, you have a large number of tools at your disposal to help you keep your organization safe. And this is a list of some of the things that are available just within a standard E3 license. And I'll show you some of these today, certainly not all of them. If you go up into the Enterprise E5 license, you then get another layer of tools on top of these that can allow you to do even cleverer things. So you do have a lot of tools at your disposal to keep your data safe. And probably, we work with 70 or 80 clients a year, and the tools that are shown on this screen, a very small percentage of the companies are using these actively in the day-to-day job. So, that there is a lot more that we are aware that companies can be doing to keep their data safer. Okay, yeah, so these are some of the E5. Good security is about good design. It doesn't just happen by chance. So to keep data safe, you have to do that purposefully and actively. You have to sit down, think about it, think about what the data is, analyze your risks, work out exactly what it is you're protecting against, work out who you're protecting your data against, and actually work out what it is you're protecting. Some companies just do a carte blanche, we're going to protect everything and encrypt everything, but actually probably 95% of the data flowing around within your organization doesn't need that level of security. It won't actually, from a risk-based approach, impact your business if that data gets out of your organization. So you have to put the work into properly analyze what it is that you're trying to achieve. What do you want to protect against? Well, these are the 3 main things. So disruption, denial of service, this is your hackers, this is your viruses, your Trojan horses, your phishing attacks, people trying to disrupt your organization, hold you to ransom, take your servers down, take your desktops down. Obviously you need to protect against that. Theft, you're protecting yourself against your commercially important information falling into the wrong hands, your price lists, your product designs, your business strategies, your financial information. And then personal data breaches, and this is where the GDPR comes in. So there's now quite stringent legislation to force companies to deal with personal data properly. And in my mind, that's a really good thing, because it does give a very good framework for you to think through how you're going to keep personal data safe. I'm going to assume that your denial of service, all of your hardware type stuff is dealt with by somebody else, and we're just going to talk today about the theft and the personal data. So the data, the files and documents that you personally or your team is managing on a day-by-day basis, how can you and your team keep those safer? Who are you going to protect the data against? As I say, hackers, that's probably not your job. Although, there are a few things that you can, sensible things you can do if you're phishing emails and things. You're going to protect it against yourself. Hands up if you've ever accidentally sent an attachment to the wrong person. I saw a bloke who actually had to go through a disciplinary process with once, almost cry one day when he'd copied the wrong person on an email. You have to protect data from you yourself doing silly things. family, well, lots of people are working from home much more. And so one of the things we've had to do as an organization is just risk assess that. So what's the risk of, people living in shared houses or, other people coming into the house? It's a different type of environment that we have to control. Colleagues, you want to be making sure, again, your colleagues don't do anything silly. But also colleagues leave, they go to competitor companies. You need to protect your price list against your colleague just sort of sending it to his Hotmail address and taking that to your competitor when he leaves. Contractors, obviously, same as colleagues really. Client suppliers, your data is going to fall into lots of different hands, and you need to make sure that you still have control of those files, whoever's actually accessing them. What do you want to protect? As I say, commercially sensitive data and personal data. So commercially sensitive data, contracts, price lists, financials, meeting minutes, client lists, all sorts of stuff that you just don't want to fall into the wrong hands. And it's important to understand what this is, because like I say, if you try and protect every single document, you're going to make it difficult for people to actually do stuff with those documents that they need to do. If I'm just putting a project plan together for a new project that we've got, it doesn't really matter if that goes outside of the organization. It's not of commercial value to anybody. So probably applying encryption, which is going to restrict certain things that I can do with that document, isn't appropriate. So measure what level of security is appropriate to the different types of information that you're handling.
Carl, Pfizer's just asking what IPR is on the slide.
Intellectual property. So this would be product design documents or specs of software, or the stuff that your company produces, which is valuable commercially. Intellectual property rights, IPR. Apologies for that. And then you've got personal data. So, and this is stuff covered by GDPR, and this is things like personnel files, financial information, details, names and addresses, and financial transactions with clients and suppliers. Depending on the type of organization you are, if you're actually dealing with the general public, any information that you're gathering about them. Or if you're a solicitor or accountant and you've got clients, all of that personal information and your sales and marketing information. And, this has to be handled in a very different way to your commercial information. And it's covered by different legislation and needs different, controls. So just while we're talking about GDPR, there's 6 core principles for handling personal data within your organization, which your organization will be very aware of and perhaps will have trained you on these. Obviously, a couple of years ago, this was very current. When you're handling personal data, that's data that has important personal information about people, dates of birth, addresses, credit card numbers, job descriptions, all of that type of stuff. You need to be mindful of this. So you can only store that data if it's for lawful reason, and you have to be transparent with the person that you have collected that data and that you're holding it. You have to limit the amount of processing you do on it. You have to minimize the collection, so you're only gathering information that you justifiably need. You need to make sure it's accurate. You need to limit the storage, and you need to ensure that it's secure and confidential. And this is, by law, you need to be, if you've got any confidential information on your network, you need to be doing these things to that. So obviously, the key question is, if you're having to do all of these things to all of the files that you have which have personal information in, simple question, do you know where all of your commercially sensitive and personal data is? Now, I thought we were pretty good at this because obviously the type of company we are, we've got all the tools. And I was doing a random search on one of our probably shouldn't even admit this, to be honest. One of our suppliers the other day, and I found a scan of his driving license somewhere where it shouldn't be. So it's very easy to lose track of where data is within your organization. And if you don't apply some of the principles that I'm going to go on to describe, then you can very quickly end up in a situation where you've just got stuff, confidential documents in inboxes and outboxes and sent items and emailed all over the place and in people's OneDrives, on people's desktops and scattered throughout your shared drive. And if that's where you're starting, then it's going to be pretty impossible to actually put the controls in place to manage, as you need to do by law, the personal and commercially sensitive data that you've got. So obviously, key question there. How does Microsoft 365 help? Well, firstly, we're working with lots of companies at the moment moving from a shared file server environment into a cloud environment. And that is a fantastic opportunity to get things organized. So rather than just lifting the file server up and dumping it all onto SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever you're going to do with it, what you can do is you can park your file server and you can say to people, right, take this opportunity to work out what files you need, what files you don't need, design a new folder structure, move things nicely into it, and then all of the other stuff that you don't need, we're just going to make it read-only, we're going to archive it off so you still have access to it, but let's start afresh with a nice new structure and put some good processes in place to make sure that that structure stays nice. So it's a once in a 20-year opportunity to actually get our files organized. Once the files are moved onto the cloud, we've got a very good opportunity to do cleverer things to keep the documents more secure, and this is what I'll be showing you. And you've got lots of new tools to help protect this data. Importantly, this isn't going to happen by itself. This needs to be a proper project, properly thought through. People need to be trained. It needs to be purposeful, and then it needs to be monitored and looked after afterwards. And this is the big risk that we're seeing at the moment, is that because of COVID and because of the rush to go onto Teams and to get into the cloud, that things aren't being done in a structured, well-managed way, and therefore it's going to be very easy to get back into a situation where things are disorganized again, and we're going to miss the opportunity to get things properly set up and properly organized. So, 6 steps for data security. This is where I'll start to do some demonstrations. So anything could happen from here. Step 1, save your documents to the cloud. Hugely important. Once the document's in the cloud, then suddenly you've got huge amounts more control over that document. Step 1. Save your documents to the cloud. Hang on, I hear you ask, isn't our file server safer than putting it in the cloud? And this is a perfectly reasonable question to ask. Surely a file server that's within your organization's walls, looked after by your IT people with your own firewalls, is going to be a lot safer than it is on Microsoft servers somewhere in the West Country. Well, who knows where that document is. So as I said before, from literally just from an infrastructure and security point of view, the answer is no. If a hacker wants to hack into your file server, as opposed to hacking into Microsoft's file servers, I can pretty much guarantee that they're going to choose your file servers because it's going to be an easier task than trying to break into Microsoft with all the effort that they go into securing them. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about saving a file into the cloud. Just bear with me a sec. Sorry, just bear with me. Right, so let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do, this is my personal machine, and I'm just going to create a new Word document. So Thursday webinar. Okay, so there's my really safe Word documents. I know it's safe because it's literally on my Surface, and you know this could equally be the file server, and I know that nobody's got access to that. So we've got a nice new Word document. Okay. I now want to let Heidi and Paddy have a quick look at that document. So this is nice, safe, secure document, nicely protected. How do I give Heidi and Paddy a look at that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my email, and I'm going to create a new email, and I'm going to drag it in as an attachment. And I'm going to say Paddy. Hello, please can you have a look at this document? And I'm going to hit the send button. Okay. So there's my lovely protected, secure document. But it's not, is it? I've now got I've now got many copies of the document. So I've got a copy of the document in my sent items. There it is. Paddy and Heidi have now got a copy of the document. What they're going to do is they're going to hit the save attachment button, and they're going to save that document to their OneDrive maybe, or their shared drive. So we've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 copies of that document. So that document's got some customer prices in. So my manager comes in and says, right, we need to make sure that document's secure. Can you encrypt it for me? So I go, okay, yeah, I can do that. So I come in and I go into File, and it's in here, Information, Protect Documents, and I'm going to encrypt it with a password. I'm going to put a lovely password in here, which is probably the same password that I use for everything else. There we go. So now a password is required to open this document, which is great. So this document's protected. But the other 5 documents I've just sent out, how do I protect those? I can't. I've lost control of those. Paddy, because he's such an awesome account manager, is being chased by at least half a dozen other of our competitors. He's now got our prices, and when he goes, he'll take those with him because he's that sort of guy, aren't you, Paddy?
I'm absolutely not that sort of guy, but yeah, for the sake of this, yeah, completely.
So in the normal world, we've lost control of this document. We've lost control of the data. Even if I've encrypted it and put a password on, I now have to somehow get that password to Paddy and Heidi. If one of those goes rogue, I can change the password, but again, I can't change it on their documents. And if that password is used for other documents as well, then it's really hard. It's really hard to keep our documents safe in this old world. So what am I going to do? Let me just create another document that doesn't have that password on. Documents. Let me just put a bit of text in there. Yeah, Office 365 doesn't like empty documents. Okay, so this is what I do in the new world. So I've created a document, and I'm going to come into Teams. Do this, and I'm going to go into. So this is our live Teams environment. And as you can see, it's nicely organized. So we've got lots of internal teams, all prefixed with AMT, and then we've got various client sites and client teams. So we have a AMT Teams demo team that we use for this type of stuff. And I've created a channel called Security Webinar just for today. And when I create that, I get this Files tab that I can use for storing files. So what I'm going to do is this document that I've just created, I'm now going to drag into Teams. There we go. And I'm going to delete it from my desktop. So I've now got one version of the document within Teams, and it's called another document. So I can now take control of this document. So if I now want to, in fact, what I'm then going to do, just to make life easier, I'm going to open this library in SharePoint because yeah, it just gives you better functionality. So all of your files that you store in Teams are actually stored within a SharePoint site that sits in the background. And it's that SharePoint site that gives you all of this lovely functionality. So there's my document that I've just created within SharePoint. I want Heidi and Paddy to have a look at it. So I'll click on the share button and I type the names in here. Heidi, Paddy. This and hit send. So that's now sent an email with the link to this document to Paddy and Heidi. This may well be just very, very standard functionality for you. We will get on some more advanced stuff shortly, which, yeah, going through in a logical manner. So Paddy and Heidi now open this document. They've now got access to it, but there's still only one copy of this document. So we still have control. So even now 3 people have got access to this, we've still got very, very good control over the information that's in here. So I can see Heidi's in. Say hello, Heidi. Heidi's just deleted my text. Okay. And then from here, I can also then open this document in Word and get the full functionality of Word. So same principle, I'm still working within Word, I'm still working with my documents, but we just got much better control. So this then comes on to my second step. Once we've got our file in the cloud, send links, not attachments. And this is probably the biggest culture shift that you will need to do in your organization to start controlling your data. Send links, not attachments. I've said this so many hundreds of times, even within our organization. And it does take months and months to actually get this totally embedded. And it takes senior management really to embrace this and to be prepared to send emails, reject emails and say, why are you sending me an attachment? Why have you just lost control of this document? I don't want an attachment. I want links. Send me links, copy, send links. One of the lovely advantages of sending links, say I've sent the link to this document out and I suddenly realize that I've made a total hash of it. I can go in and I can correct it. I can put lots of, if I'm quick enough, I can do that before the boss even sees. And so many times I've sent a link to the document, think, oh no, I've forgotten to add this in, and I go in and I add it in, and that addition is there before the end recipient has actually opened it. Even better than that, I can go back into SharePoint and I can go back into the documents. I can see on the right hand side that there's a link here, so I can see exactly who's got access. I see Paddy and Heidi have got access to this document, and that this link's giving access. And I can come in here, hopefully, just get rid of that. Manage access. Okay, and I'm going to delete that link. Okay, deleting that link means, as you can see here, Heidi and Paddy no longer have access to this document. So as soon as they close it, they're not going to be able to get back in again.
Hi, Cole. Just had a question through from Pfizer saying, why would you not create the document in SharePoint?
Yeah, absolutely, you could. I just did it that way to, in fact, one of the really clever things, the reason you would create it in SharePoint Because in SharePoint, you can use your content types. So if I wanted to create a proposal and the library is set up properly, I'll actually come in here and I say create a new proposal. And that then brings through a lot of the settings and all of your document templates as well. So yeah, absolutely. In the real world, you would be creating your documents within Teams or within SharePoint. I just sort of did that as an illustration, really. Okay, so we now have a single document. Another thing that you get, because we're now in the cloud, is you get version control. And again, this is all about not creating multiple copies of the same document, because as soon as you've got multiple copies, you've then multiplied your challenges in keeping that document safe and secure. So if I do a few updates to this document, and again, this is a culture change, normally what people do is, I want to change this document, so I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to copy all it into the current library. Security webinar, copy here. Okay, so I made a copy, so I've now got another document 1, and now we're going to start working on this one, and I've sort of forgotten what's in that, but it's still there. And I was doing some consultancy last year with a public sector organisation, and the lady that I was working with, who was the finance director, just wouldn't. She said my stuff's organised. I don't need to do all of this. I'm quite happy with the way that I'm working. And I said to her, okay, can you point me at your final version of last year's annual report, please? And she said, yeah, of course I can do that. And she went into the folder and she drilled down. It was nicely organized, and there was a folder called Final Reports. And she went in there, and there were a few documents in there. And then there was another folder called Final Report. And she went into Final Report, and there was Final Report 1, Final Report 2, Final Report A. And I said, which was the most recent version? And she said, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying now. So this is what we don't want. So I'm going to delete that document. What we have is version history. Every time we make a change, the changes are recorded in here, along with who made them, when they were made. I can go in, I can look at any of the previous versions. So another very simple tool to make sure that all of my information stays in the same place. Okay, so step 3. Okay, step 3, still fairly basic stuff. Use Teams, organize your teams. Why? Because people need to know where to store things. And this is probably, once we've got through the multiple copies of documents, the biggest issue with security is people just don't know where to store things, and so things get stored all over the place in random places. So as you move into Teams, very straightforward, think through what teams you're going to need. Don't allow every single person to create new teams all over the place, and try and put some sort of governance documents or guidance together, so people can very quickly understand where stuff should be stored. This is something we learned the hard way. We before we took control of our teams, we had about 3 or 4 different marketing teams, a couple of sales teams, all sorts of projects all over the place. And now we've got very strict control as to who can create a team, what channels go in a team, how they're organized, what the security is. And so people now know, so if I'm working on the white link project, I know that I go into the customer white link, and all of the different projects are in the different channels, and each of the channels will have its own folder structure, and we can very quickly get to the information that we need. We've got a reasonable to high degree of confidence that the information that we need is going to be in there, and that just works. So you need to think through how to store things, and then if people are storing things in the right place, then you've got a good chance of knowing where this personal and where this corporate information is going to live, and then you can start worrying about securing it. Yeah, organize your teams. Another little tool that we've got is we've developed this launch pad. And this is a new tab that we've got, which sits within Teams. And it's just a really simple way of putting tiles together so people can get a much more visual way to understand where all the data is going to be. And we're developing this up so you can have proper hierarchies, because what we found in Teams is it's very flat. You get one list of teams and you can't divide those into locations or departments or functions or anything. You just got a list of teams. So something that we're working on is putting some functionality in that allow you to do something a bit better than that. But yeah, get your teams organized. Okay, now we're starting to get on to some of the more meaty stuff now. Understand the tools that you now have available. Okay, so there's some tools that with a modest amount of setting up within your organization are going to allow you to start doing some really, really clever things with your documents. So let me go back and I'll show you probably the one of the two most interesting. So within Microsoft 365, you have a thing called labels, which are fairly new, probably a year or so old. And you have two types of labels. You've got sensitivity labels and you've got retention labels. And these allow you to very easily classify the documents and really control those documents. So if you look at my copy of Word here, I've created a new document and it's given me these buttons. So I've got general, confidential. I've got two types of confidential. I've got restricted personal and I've got board confidential. So 5 pretty straightforward categories that I can use to tell this document how secure it needs to be. So for example, if I say this document's confidential internal,
I'll come out.
Can you come out of that, Paddy? Can you close that down? I do love a live demo.
Are those the same labels, Colin? Are on the sensitivity part of the ribbon?
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're the same ones that are in here. Okay, let me try that again. No. Okay, maybe it's going to take a little while for that to work, I think. Let me open a different document. Okay. Yeah, so that's worked. So what's happened is, if you look top left here, I've now labeled this document as confidential internal, and that's done a number of things to this document. So the first thing it's done is, obviously, it's put confidential, do not distribute in the header of the document. So even if this document's printed, it's actually got on there confidential, do not distribute, and everybody knows that there's some important stuff in this document that needs to be treated in a certain way. So very simple thing, and this could be a watermark or footer header. That's totally in your control what that does. Second thing it's done is it's encrypted this document. So if I save the document and now try to open it within Office 365, it's going to check that I'm logged into AMT's tenancy. So I'm logged into AMT's Microsoft 365 account before it'll decrypt that document. That's very similar to password protecting it, apart from the fact I haven't had to put a password in. So it's taken my login credentials and it's going to check the documents against those. Now, the beauty of this is I can share this link with Paddy. And we all know Paddy's a bit dodgy. So I've sent the link to this. I've been very good. I've sent the link. Obviously, Paddy can now take that link. He can download the documents. And when he moves to our competitor next week, he can stick that on his memory stick because he's working from home and we can't really check on that. And he can take that with him. Now, when he leaves on Friday, we're going to shut off his Office 365 account so he can't log in anymore.
Can I just butt in there?
No.
Anything that you haven't told me, or is this just for the sake of the webinar? Just to be checking.
I'll have a chat. I'll have a chat after Paddy. It's fine.
Okay, yeah, I look forward to that.
He then goes into his new job on Monday and say, "Hey, look, guys, I've got their price list." And he tries to open it up, and it goes, "Please log into AMT." He can't log in, and therefore the document won't decrypt itself. So you've totally protected this document now from accidentally being emailed out, from being downloaded, from somebody hacking you and stealing it and take it somewhere else. You've got a really high level of protection over this document. And literally all you've had to do is come into sensitivity or have a look at the buttons on the top and just select what level of sensitivity you've got. These sensitivity labels are also available in Outlook, which I don't have open. So if you were to create an email, you could similarly classify it with a sensitivity label. And for example, if you said internal only, that email wouldn't be allowed to be sent outside of the organization. And the nice things about classifying emails is if you then start adding attachments into an email because you want to send them externally, it will give any attachments in the email the same level of protection that it's given to the email itself. So really good way. And you know what you have to do is you have to work out for your organization what levels of classification you want, and then do a bit of work to configure these and roll these out within Microsoft 365. And then these will become available to anybody in the organization. And you can even use this to encrypt and classify PDFs and images and non-Microsofty documents. So sensitivity labels, really worth having a look at. Really nice bit of kit that you've got within your subscription. On a very similar, where am I? Too many windows. The other type of label that you've then got is retention labels. Very similar. So same document, I've got this another document, and I can now label this document with a retention label. And again, these labels have been set up, totally designed by ourselves. So I can say this document is a contract. It's a contract or a legal document. That means if I classify it as a contract, this document will have a retention policy of 7 years. So if I try to delete this document before that 7 years is up, it won't let me do that, it says. Delete. And hopefully, yeah, we get a little message up here. The label that's been applied to this item prevents it from being edited or deleted. Check the item's label for more details. And so I've protected this document against accidental deletion. And then once that 7 years is up, depending on how that label's been set up, if I just go into this report, okay. An email is going to be sent to whoever is the retention person for these documents. So I've got here, I'm just looking at the 1 day retention rule. So any documents that have been labeled 1 day retention will end up in here. So I can have a look at documents that have been classified with this label. And again, this works on Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams. So I can have a look at all documents that have been classified with this. These are documents which were, well, in this case, created more than a day ago, but in the real world, it would be more than 7 years ago. So these documents are due to be deleted, so I can check through them, and then I can say dispose from Office 365. So all of your GDPR issues around retention and disposition. So having to make sure that you keep certain information for a certain amount of time, and then make sure that you've actually cleaned it up after a certain amount of time. You've suddenly got a very simple, straightforward tool to allow you to do that in a very easy way. And there's some really nice features. So for example, you could set up event-driven disposition. So you can say, from the date somebody leaves the organization, store all of their HR information for 12 months and then automatically delete it. And then when Paddy leaves on Monday, I can just go, Paddy's left, and it would kick that process into action. And 12 months later, he would be a distant memory as far as our system's concerned. Happy with that, Paddy?
He's gone.
Lost for words, Cole. What can I say?
Yeah, so really clever stuff.
I was going to give everyone my email address to contact me if they had any further queries, but I don't know if it's worth bothering now, to be honest.
No, just if they've got a job going.
Yeah,
Yeah, indeed. And these are the tools that you use to set these up, and you sort of need to know what you're doing, but they're not majorly complex, and you've got lots of controls that you can put in to set your retention and sensitivity labels up. Really worth doing because they're very simple tools for the end user to use, but then they give you very powerful functionality in the back end. Just while I'm here, just to show you some of the other stuff that we've got in the Microsoft Security and Compliance Center, all sorts of things really. These are the main tools that you get with Microsoft Security and Compliance. Talking still about GDPR, one of the biggest scary things about GDPR is somebody can email in and say, I want every piece of information that your organization holds on me, and I want it within the next couple of weeks, please. And you've got to produce that. If all of your information's on Microsoft 365, that becomes a really easy thing to do. You come into data subject requests, which is just down here. You create a new case. So here's a couple of test ones. Let's go through it. Create a new case, give it a name, type in the request details. So the data subject, this is the person who you want to gather information about. You confirm the case, and then either Microsoft 365 will just go away and find and produce a big report on every piece of information about that person, or you can go in and you can do more fine-grained searches and give that search a lot more filters and control. So you can use the tools to go in and do your data investigations. You can even do legal holds. So sometimes if you're involved in a legal case and people aren't just asking for information on a certain subject, but you're under a legal obligation to make sure that that information is held and not deleted or modified. You can actually go to that level. You can find all the information, you can put it in legal hold, and once it's in legal hold, it will actually become impossible for anybody to change or delete that information. And so from a legal point of view, you've protected yourself against people maliciously going in and disposing of evidence, I guess. So another really good tool. And again, this all happens because you've stored your data on the Microsoft cloud, and you've then got all of these tools available. So just going back to the presentation, understand the tools you have available. Train, step 5, train. Lots of these tools are easy to use. People still need to be trained how to use them and made to understand the importance of using them. But then also, you might have 5 sensitivity labels. People need to know what those different levels of sensitivity mean. So again, they're not applying them to everything, but just to the relevant documents. So however simple you think it is, make sure that your team's properly trained and that you've got decent training and reference materials for people to use. And then step 6, audit and review. These systems are great. They don't look after themselves. So you can implement teams. You can set it all up really nicely with all really nice teams and channels and tell people what to do. But if you're not going in and looking after it, make sure people are using it properly, give them extra training where it's needed, keeping on top of your new starters, lots of lovely tools within the admin center so that you can see how many people are using Teams and how many people are still using OneDrive and how many attachments are being sent and all this type of stuff. So, you really need to continually audit and review, particularly when it's been first implemented, but very much on an ongoing basis as well. And then, understand the tools. So we've had a quick look at labels, data loss prevention, communication compliance. That's a fairly new tool, and literally that will monitor communications within the organization, and it will check for abusive language and stuff like that. And it uses machine learning to flag things that it thinks are going on that you wouldn't want to be going on within your organization. So, and that's being developed at the moment by Microsoft. Content searches and e-discovery we've talked about, and legal hold. There's another thing that I've forgotten to put on here, where in a large organization, particularly lawyers and accountants and stuff, you can actually divide your organization up into distinct groups or bubbles, as we might now call them, and you can prevent those bubbles from communicating with each other, so that you can have demarcations. So you know that I used to once do some work for a market research company that had both Pepsi and Coca-Cola on their books, and you can imagine the issues that they would have if those two teams inappropriately communicated. So yeah, you can prevent that. So lots of really good tools. That's sort of, well, I've sort of run out of time, to be honest. I could talk all day on this stuff because I think it's really cool. But hopefully that's just given you a flavour of some of the real, some of the tools that you can use and some of the thinking that and processes that you need to go through to start using Microsoft 365 to get your files and your data more secure. One of the things that we do offer is a 2-day security audit that we'll come in and do. So if you want us to come in and literally just give your system a once over and give you some recommendations and start to put a roadmap together as to how you can use these tools to do stuff better. It's usually a couple of £1,000, but we've discounted it for people that have been on the webinar. So that's a very easy thing that you can do to start securing your organization. Hope that was useful. Back to you, Paddy, if you haven't left by now.
No, I'm still here. I've slipped into something a little bit more comfortable. Thank you very much. That was really good. I got a lot from that as well. Obviously, I knew it all anyway. Yeah. But no, thank you for that. Any questions from any of you guys out there? Very quiet. I'm going to assume that Colin covered everything you wanted to know. If you've got any questions at all, just drop me an email. My email address is paddy.martin@amtevolve.com. And happy to answer any questions that you have there at all, or give me a bell. Our contact details are all on the website as well, amtevolve.com. And there's all kinds of lovely stuff on there as well about the other services we do, consultancy and training and SharePoint intranets and all of that lovely stuff. So yeah, guys, thank you very much for taking an hour out of your time this afternoon. I know we're all busy. We've had something come through on the chat window. Just let me see what that is. Oh, it was a thank you from Anna. Anna, you're more than welcome. Not that I really did much. It's all down to Cole, but cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. Any questions, just give me a shout. Cool. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.